I may be a bit of an idiot. Now you may be asking, nay, pondering to yourselves, Jmulls, why are you an idiot? If not more than we already know. Well, throughout this entire Saga of Xenoblade series, I've only made a few references to the world itself of each Xenoblade game, when in actuality, and upon further reflection, I really should have made a video by itself talking about the world design for the 3 Xenoblade games. I'll focus more on Xenoblade 3's world itself when we get there, but seeing as we're doing Xenoblade 1 and 2 simultaneously, let's cover Xenoblade 1 and 2's worlds right now, and how they both tell a story all of themselves. And let's give this topic the time in the proverbial spotlight that it so richly and rightfully deserves. So Xenoblade Chronicles 1 takes place on the Bionis, to the shock and appall of all the players out there who were unfamiliar with this reality. Xenoblade 2 takes place in the world of Allrest. 2 widely different worlds, but in the same series, but also worlds that they themselves further the narrative themes and the story itself of their respective game. Let's focus in on Xenoblade 1, the Bionis and the Mechonis right now. Because most of the world in Xenoblade 1 is a freaking ocean, so vast and expansive that Luffy from One Piece dreams about sailing across. And in such a vast and empty world that Xenoblade 1 encapsulates, we have our story told on the backs of 2 titans frozen in time. That's totally from the back of the box. The Bionis, a giant titan, full to the brim with organic life. Plants, trees, a bunch of fungus, rivers, streams, mountains, seas, dirt, and rock, and a whole bunch of animals and plants. It is contrasted against, on the other end of the Mechonis sword, I totally wasn't about to say Bionis sword, is the Mechonis. Essentially, what if Okumuna's palace from Persona 5 was a titan in Xenoblade? Remember that old movie called Robots? Yeah, this is pretty much where that location is. A completely mechanized landscape filled to the brim with machinery, nuts and bolts not mine, robots, and even more giant freaking robots. And the story of Xenoblade 1 is twofold. It is a story about revenge and the concept of revenge and war, but also a story about moving on to the future, and accepting whatever the future may hold for you. And the setting for Xenoblade 1 is not only one of the most memorable in all of gaming, it is striking, beautiful, diverse, but also thematically brilliant in how it can convey the narrative themes and tone of the game through the world design, and this is something that Xenoblade excels at far more than most other, if not every other game series out there. It uses the world itself and the high fantasy aspects of it to contrast and compare to the very human narrative that is unfolding before you. Think about it like this, and I've mentioned this before in this series, but I really want to dwell on it right now. Xenoblade Chronicles 1 is a story about the Homs and the peoples of the Bionis fighting the peoples of Mechonis. A seemingly endless war between these 2 people, or the people that encompass these 2 titans. Man versus machine, Machina versus Homs, us versus them. And how is the story portrayed through the world design? Us versus them. The Bionis fights the Mechonis off rip. Literally the first scene in the game shows you the Bionis fighting the Mechonis, and then it zooms in on the fight going on the sword itself between the peoples of the Bionis and the Mechonis. The story is all about a war between us versus them, and the world itself is us as the Bionis, or the peoples of the Bionis versus the Mechonis. It is an encapsulation of the theme of war that is prevalent throughout this game. Now, that is kind of upfront and obvious if you think about it, right? You could have probably figured that out for yourself, or you did. It's not like Xenoblade or Monolith were trying to hide this. But then think about everything else. Think about all the varied zones and locations and landscapes that we had in the Bionis. All those beautiful locations that change from day to night, and then you move over to the Mechonis, and really, you explore the entirety of the Mechonis far faster than you did the Bionis, because you had faster modes of transportation. The Mechonis is also industrialized, mechanized. You can utilize jumping pads, elevators, conveyor belts, and the like to move from one location to the other, because the interior of the Mechonis is largely similar to one another, at least far more so than the Bionis is. The Mechonis has kind of the same thing going for it, whereas the Bionis has all these different landscapes and color palettes going for it, and all these different environments and weather climates. Some may think that's just lazy design for the Mechonis, but arguably, I think it's part of the charm of it. Everything is factory made on the Mechonis, made to specifications. They're all robots and machines, so everything feels kinda stale and stagnant, and repetitive, in a lot of ways. Again, only in reference to the Bionis. Everything is industrialized without much of a need for diversity or change. That's what the Mechonis is. The Bionis grew about and came about because of evolution. All the different animals and plants that came about, all the different climates because of the natural features of the Bionis. Whereas the Mechonis largely doesn't have a lot on its back or on its body itself. Most of it takes place within the Mechonis. When Egil is winning, the Mechonis is literally winning the battle against the Bionis, and the Bionis suffers damages. But when Zanza pops up and says, okay, let me solo them, he destroys the Mechonis. The Bionis quite literally beats the Mechonis there. It's an ever-evolving landscape of us versus them, of war progressing. And sometimes the battle lines can seem stagnant and drawn out as losses pile up around us while the world itself largely stays the same. And other times, in a quick moment in time, things can cataclysmically change and alter. They tell and pace the story around the Bionis and the Mechonis because the world itself is an integral part of the narrative taking place for Xenoblade Chronicles 1. It's one of the best aspects of Xenoblade 1 in my opinion, and what gives Xenoblade 1 so much charm all of its own. Because the Bionis and the Mechonis themselves are a great microcosm for what's going on in the overall story and narrative, and the human story that is taking place between the peoples that inhabit those two titans. We pop on over to Xenoblade 2, and what's different here? Well, instead of being on the backs of two titans, us versus them, the story of Xenoblade 2 is all about chasing Elysium and reaching Elysium, finding this end goal, this destination to take all of our worries and woes away, to reach a proverbial promised land. So the world of Xenoblade 2 takes place on the backs of various titans, all different to one another, with their own histories and cultures, kinda like the countries of our world, all surrounding and swimming across an endless sea of clouds with the world tree at its center, sprouting out above even the skyline, so tall and monolithic in scale that every time you're outside, you can always see the world tree on the horizon. It's always there, the theme of Elysium just out of reach, but you always know it's just right there for the taking. All we need to do is get there. So while Xenoblade 1's world, the Bionis and the Mechonis, played on the whole us versus them mentality, Xenoblade 2's All Rest plays in the idea of a dream, always being right there. You can see it, you can feel it, you can reach out to it, you can strive to accomplish it, to reach the destination, to find Elysium. It's always just out of reach, isn't it? And the entirety of the game has us circling around and going all around the world tree, up and down, left and right, north, south, east, and west, accomplishing our own mini objectives of our own, but with All Rest always serving as the perfect backdrop to perpetually remind us of our true end goal of Elysium being right there. We have to find some way, somehow, to climb the proverbial mountaintop, or in this case, tree, to reach Elysium, to reach paradise. And when we finally get there, what do we find out? That there is no Elysium, there is no paradise, there is no salvation waiting for us to arrive. If we want to fix the world, if we want to right the wrongs of our past, and to make a better world for all of us, for tomorrow, we would have to put boots on the ground, get back down to the world that we call home, and strive to make that world, our world, Elysium. Because Elysium isn't coming. Paradise isn't some destination to find, scout out, and walk to, or climb to. No, au contraire, mon ami. Paradise? Elysium is forged day after day, sweat after sweat, tier after tier, blood drop by blood drop, of our own common, collective effort to right the wrongs of humanity's past, to forge a better tomorrow for all of us, to uproot the societal wrongs and issues that have plagued us as a species since time immemorial, so that we can create something new, something wonderful, and something to behold. Because at the end of Xenoblade 2, what do we actually accomplish? We don't find Elysium. We don't reach Elysium. We don't find an endless field of green with fruit aplenty. No, what we find is an empty, barren world of dirt, where all the titans headbutt and die upon. They break their backs and their heads upon, so that we have the chance to grow something new there, to create something new. It's a fresh start, one that we collectively together as humanity agreed to set out upon. Because the world as we know it is dying, is shriveling, it is unsustainable. We were merely and simply killing ourselves, blinded to the reality of the situation we had before us. We weren't saving ourselves or protecting the ones we loved. We were damning each other to an endless and slow decline into stagnation, until there wasn't any viable, fertile ground for us to settle upon any longer. We would all end up like Mordain, resourceless, barren, and lifeless, if we didn't collectively choose to work with one another, to right the wrongs of humanity's past, uproot the societal, systemic issues, and set a course for a better tomorrow on the ship that we have right now. Because it's the only one we have, and it's our best shot to fix the wrongs of the past, and to set sail for a better tomorrow. We can't escape from the human condition. The human condition will follow us wherever we go, unless we decide to get our hands in the mud and work together to right the issues, to correct our mistakes, and to create and forge something, a world that we can be proud to call our own. That is the message of Xenoblade 2, and that is how the world itself of Xenoblade 2, all rest, contributes to its themes and its motifs. Because the true world that we would encompass at the end of Xenoblade 2 for all rest was masqueraded under a veil of clouds, while we squabbled and fought and bled and clawed our way across the backs of dying titans on the top, all while delving beneath the clouds every now and then to try and get a glimpse of humanity's past, when in actuality we were trying to learn about humanity's future all along. And the world that was once ruined, the land of Mordatha, was inhospitable. It was a barren, despicable wasteland, a monument, to borrow a line from Halo, a monument to all of our sins. But what did we do? What did we find out? That land was Elysium the entire time. It wasn't not salvageable. Does that theme start to make a little bit more sense now? Of salvages? No. Mordatha wasn't unsalvageable, or only had bits and pieces for us to study and learn and to utilize. No, that land was our salvation, because it was our land. And while we poisoned it in the past, we can make it right today and tomorrow. We just have to be willing to give a damn to try. And the moment we finally were was the end of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. But Jmulls, you're ending the video now. What about Xenoblade 3? We'll get to Xenoblade 3, don't you worry, when we finish Xenoblade 1 and 2 for the Saga of Xenoblade. But honestly, Xenoblade 3 is kind of upfront and obvious in a lot of ways. With the endless now Ionios taking place as an endless cycle, the world itself that we encompass and we progress throughout is a giant circle that we make our way slowly around until we have to go to the center of it all to break the world itself. It's beautiful in its own right and deserves its own video, and we'll get there when we get there. But that, in my opinion, is the setup for all the story that Xenoblade has on offer for Xenoblade 1 and 2. Because in my mind, to truly understand the stories of Xenoblade 1 and 2, you have to understand the world and how the world is trying to tell you its themes and tell its story, all in its own unique and palpable way. And I hope I was able to convey that to some effective degree. So thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games if you can, and as always, I'll see you all next time, and hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload and stream in the future. Bye bye everybody, until we meet again.